All right. Thank you very much, Pat. Just a reminder that these slides will be up on my website. Hopefully, I'll get the slides up before midnight tonight. The video may take until tomorrow night, but it should be available to you soon at the usual place, terrygray.org. And we've got lots to cover today, as usual. So let's get right to it. Last week, you'll recall, we about some basics and the terminology around risk, ethics, rules, and some of the AI basics, and then jumped into the question of AI's big appetite for money, for compute power, for electrical power, water, data, people, and then we talked about the hype wars. So today, which I have themed Houston, we have a problem. We're going to talk about the challenges which could potentially slow down or maybe even derail the juggernaut of the AI train here. So these are the topics we'll be hitting today. So this is what might slow down the potential for AI to do some good. And as I mentioned last week, we covered those topics. And the disappointing returns and productivity results have maybe slowed things down a little bit. It certainly made some of the Wall Street investors nervous, but there's still a ton of money going into this. So we don't have a AI winter or the bursting of the bubble right yet. So for this week, we'll start with looking at AI safety issues, especially the harmful impacts of some of these AI systems, which are not perfect and they're opaque, meaning that you can't really see what's going on inside them very well. Then we'll talk about some legal issues, especially intellectual property and liability for harm. And then what I call the elephant in the room, hallucination, misinformation. Then we'll jump from there into InfoWars and deep fakes, which gets us in the disinformation, deception area. And finally, we'll wrap up with privacy and surveillance issues, the ownership, use, and abuse of personal info. So, safety. Now, a question I want you to keep in mind as we go forward here is, what is an acceptable error rate when you have a system that's making decisions with critical implications for safety and individual well-being? No system is perfect. So the question is, how close to perfection is necessary in order to be considered safe for public use? Well, AI safety, we might agree, should be job one. And there was a AI safety summit last November in the UK, and it was the world's first AI safety summit. And they produced a working paper ahead of time. And there was an article published based on what was in that. And the author of that article kind of felt that they were focusing a lot on the really extreme existential risks and maybe not as much on the near-term ones. But when I looked at the working paper, I thought it was reasonably well balanced. It certainly had all the big existential risk kinds of things listed, but also some of the near-term ones. In this article, they extracted the following list of threats that we need to be concerned with. Number one was the issue of biological or chemical weapons. Now, I have it on good authority that that's actually not considered by experts to be a huge existential threat caused by AI. And the reason is that you don't need AI You just need access to the web to learn what you need to learn to create deadly biological viruses or chemical weapons. That's the result of a report that came out recently, I think by Rand Corporation. And also, it is the view of a fellow who just got a Nobel Prize from David Baker is his name, and he got a prize for computational biology and his work on protein folding at the University of Washington. And a postdoc told me that he had said the same thing, that you really don't need AI to, any grad student with access to the internet can create deadly biological entities. So the next one was saturate the internet with unreliable information. Well, that's already happening, so that's a risk. Scammers could use fake AI kidnappings to torment people. That is happening too. As a matter of fact, when I considered doing the first AI class a year ago, an introduction to AI, it was because there was a 60-minute segment a year and a half ago about this very problem of elderly folks being scammed by people pretending to be a relative in trouble and needing to have money right away. So that's another one that's already here, and it's getting more difficult to detect that with the ability of AI to simulate people's voices very, very realistically, deep fakes on the audio side. Next up was the critical infrastructure that isn't ready for dealing with AI-assisted cyber attacks. I have no inside information on that subject, but I'm willing to believe that our critical infrastructure is definitely not ready for that. And I am also quite willing to believe that adversaries such as China have been working for years to infiltrate our critical infrastructure so that in case of conflict, they can do a lot of damage here. So that's a really big deal. And number 5, AI could reduce the cost of disinformation attacks. I think that's true, and we'll see in a minute. Rand Corporation that studies some of the stuff is saying the same thing, that is a present danger. Number 6, you could have personalized disinformation campaigns. And once again, based on the Rand report and others, that seems to be happening already. Number 7, becoming over-reliant on AI for critical tasks. And that ties into the question I wanted you to remember of how much tolerance for error can we have on these systems? And are we going to be relying on these systems for critical tasks more than we should? Answer, spoiler alert, is yeah, we probably will be. Number 8, AI could try to undermine human control. Well, we're a long ways from the Terminator and some of the other sci-fi types of things, but there's no question that advanced AI can be very persuasive and potentially manipulative. So this is a real concern that we got to watch out for. And finally, sense of complacency with respect to our relations to these systems, especially in the sense of emotional connection and feigned intimacy. We'll talk more about that next week. Now, 2 big questions come out of this AI Safety Summit. The first one is, should the focus of regulators and policymakers be on the long-term existential risks that could result in the demise of humanity, or, and those usually are in the case of some catastrophic thing that they cause to happen, or taking control over all of the systems we depend on. or should the focus be more on the near-term immediate effects of AI? And there's certainly plenty of those to keep policymakers occupied. There is some cynical perspective that the big tech companies really want the policymakers to stay focused on the long-term stuff so they don't get in the way of the near-term progress and potential profits to be made by rolling out AI even without having been fully tested against some of these short-term problems. And that leads to the other key question here. Is the focus going to be on safety or on revenue? And indeed, in that working paper I referred to for this summit, it includes the quote, individual companies may not be sufficiently incentivized to address all the potential harms of their systems. You think? Well, that is one of the challenges of being in a capitalistic society. So we can probably assume that there is going to be a lot of tension inside some of these companies, including the ones that start out with very altruistic goals, but then find out that either they have shareholders to satisfy or they need to raise money in order to pay for the extremely high costs of training these systems. A data point that should give one pause a little bit is the next summit, AI summit in France next spring. Safety is not the topic. It is now just one of 5 topics. So there may be a little dilution of the safety focus already happening there. This is a cartoon that came out shortly after that summit a year ago. And you see all of the leaders of the various constituents, organizations, and areas saying we all declare that this is serious stuff, potentially catastrophic risk to humankind. And under their breath, they're all saying, and I cannot wait to develop it first. I think that probably is right on point. So here's another view on what an existential threat might be. This fellow heads an ethics center at the University of Massachusetts. And he says that these AI systems aren't going to blow us up or take us over in the way the sci-fi movies say, but what they are going to do is alter the way people view themselves and potentially degrade our abilities and experiences that we consider essential to being human. And he says that gradual erosion of some of our most important skills is potentially the existential threat to worry about. Already algorithms undermining capacity to make judgments or enjoy serendipitous encounters, hone our critical thinking. And he cites T.S. Eliot's closing lines of The Hollow Men. This is the way the world ends, he wrote, not with a bang, but a whimper. We'll talk more about this, what it means to be human, next week as well. But that brings us to the paradox of automation. And this was actually number 7 on that list of worries in the working paper on the AI Safety Summit. We've become over-reliant on AI to complete critical tasks. Now, these quotes are from a paper article that came out several years ago looking at an airline disaster over the Atlantic when some junior pilots were at the controls. The senior pilot was on break, and the flight control system started doing bizarre things and basically put the aircraft into a stall. And the junior pilots didn't recognize what was happening, and it never occurred to them that one of the sensors that was feeding the flight control system had iced over and was giving it bad data. And by the time the senior pilot got back to the cockpit, it was too late and all lives were lost. And so the conclusion of this article was that these automatic systems, as convenient as they may be, they allow for incompetence or people who are not fully skilled to operate them. And that's okay as long as everything is behaving normally. But when things go south in unusual situations, you need a particularly skillful response. And that is not going to happen if you're relying on these automatic systems, and that tends to remove the motivation to practice those skills. So we rarely question computer output unless it's the computer saying that you're not going to get your insurance policy or you're not going to get something. If it's personal, we might push back. But in general, we tend to be pretty accepting of what computer systems tell us. Now, we know that in general, complex systems may fail. For example, back in 1979, NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, had a little incident where someone loaded a training tape into the computer system, and it put everybody on alert because they didn't realize that it was a training tape, and they thought that 2,000 bombers were descending on the United States from the Soviet Union, and they scrambled the Strategic Air Command, and shortly thereafter they figured out that it was a false alarm. But that could have gone a different way. That, by the way, was the inspiration for the 1983 movie War Games. And then later in 1983, a Soviet officer in charge of the so-called doomsday device that Russia had to start a counterattack if they were ever attacked, his instrumentation said that they were under attack. And fortunately, he paused and questioned that and didn't push the button to launch the counterattack. And fortunately, it turned out that it was a strange weather condition that fooled their radars. So these are examples of how complicated systems can fail, and potentially with catastrophic results. Now, these are old school computer systems that are more explainable than the new AI systems. So we got to be really careful going forward if these are going to be in the critical path for life decisions. And one of the concerns is that the threats that we are under going forward are going to be real time with the strategic missile and aircraft attacks. We had some amount of warning with the early warning systems, minutes to make decisions. With cyber attacks, it might be seconds or nanoseconds. And there's not going to be time for a human to think about what are the possible alternative explanations for what they're seeing. So there are going to have to be some automated responses. So we better hope they're going to get it right. So will we even know when the AI is wrong or how to respond if it is? And will there be time to intervene? Those are pretty serious questions. And there's no good answer to it. But we're in a new world as far as these critical systems that we are going to have to rely on. A friend of mine sent this to me just this week. Careful, they have technology that makes you stupid. And that goes to the same point of the paradox of automation. I think this one probably dates back to television as the technology of choice at that moment, but it probably applies to AI as well, if you follow the thread of the last couple of slides here. So what about content moderation? We've all heard about YouTube videos of terrorists exploding things and uh, really nasty content showing up on Facebook, etc. So clearly, content moderation is a big deal, and there is certainly a lot of harmful content that we would like to be suppressed before it gets uh, put up on the public platforms. Uh, it's a hard problem, though. You'd think that it's a particularly well suited problem to AI. This is a classification task, which machine learning systems are getting pretty good at. But that's true if and only if the criteria for the classification are well defined and discernible from the content. And intent is important, and it's not generally discernible, or not always. Uh, Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress a few years ago when asked about content moderation that he thought AI would be up to the task of dealing with it. But I think he was wrong about that. So here's an example. Questions about what's unacceptable nudity or toxic speech. These are not well-defined concepts and ultimately require human judgment. And especially because the intent matters and often the viewer themselves and their mindset matters. So examples include a terrorist training PR video of violence, or is it a journalist in a war zone reporting? Is the political misinformation a result of a lying politician or satire? And a baby in a bathtub, is that child porn or a proud parent? Those are difficult decisions for AI to deal with. That requires some human judgment. Now, there's generative AI, as we've talked about, as also distinct from the earlier or alternative forms of machine learning that are based on statistical methods. And these have been around longer, and they're not much in the headlines. But there's some computer scientists at Princeton that feel that we really should be paying more attention to these other forms of AI and the implications that they have on people's lives. And they argue that what they call predictive AI and predictive optimization systems in particular are more consequential than generative AI systems, because these are the systems that are being used to make decisions on hiring, education, banking, criminal justice, et cetera. We'll see specific examples shortly. Their point is that these systems claim to essentially be able to predict human behavior in the future, whether a person in prison is likely to reoffend, or whether or not a student has plagiarized something or not, whether you're going to pay back a bank loan in the future, et cetera. And AI is getting really good at weather, but not in predicting future behavior of people. So another article I came across talks about the difference between accuracy and truth. You can have models or systems that are highly accurate when measured against their design parameters, but may or may not have anything to do with truth. And in cases where human judgment and ethics are considerations, that's a challenge. So here are some of the specific examples where these systems can be very dangerous. Somebody shows up at a hospital and somebody makes a decision to either send them to ER or to send them home because they think the symptoms are not warranting any extreme measures. Or someone is being considered for parole or bail based on somebody's prediction of their likelihood to either skip bail or reoffend. Who gets to get coverage for insurance, or how much is it going to cost them? What job applicants are going to get an interview? And as we've talked about previously, the question of, are we currently under attack? And how will we test that hypothesis that we are? There are systems being marketed today to healthcare systems, to judicial legal systems, the court systems, insurance companies, hiring agencies, HR departments, et cetera, all of which purport to be able to give some high reliability estimate of what people's behavior is going to be. And studies have shown and are documented by these folks at Princeton that they are rarely any better than throwing dice. And we shouldn't be relying on them for making life-critical decisions. So if you are the victim of one of these computer programs that has decided that you're not worthy of insurance or you're not worthy of parole, who are you going to call? And do you have any right of appeal when the computer says you are what you are not? You know, another example would be if you've been fingered by a facial identification, facial recognition system as a culprit, and you weren't the one that was tagged. Do you have a right of appeal? And then the question, what error rate is okay? In education, lots of teachers are using AI to fight AI. That is to say, they're using these products which purport to be able to determine whether a homework submission was generated by an AI system. And this study from Bloomberg said that the system they were testing falsely flagged 1% to 2% of the essays as probably written by AI. Well, 1% to 2% doesn't sound too bad, but if you multiply that by the scale of the number of students that are submitting these essays, that can be an awful lot of false accusations against kids that they're plagiarists. And just think about what that would do to a teenager that's honest and innocent and being told that the computer says you cheated. That's not to be trivialized. That's a big deal. The bigger question is that, as this Atlantic article said, cheating is getting worse and the colleges don't really know how to deal with it. Some teachers are embracing AI and they're recognizing that they have to change their mode of operation. But it's a big concern in higher ed for sure, and high schools, et cetera. Here's a case of parents taking a school to court for punishing their student for using AI. And here's a company, Chegg, which started out in the textbook rental business and then pivoted to online subscriptions for studying aids. And guess what? People are finding that just asking ChatGPT questions was cheaper and more effective than having a subscription to this company. So they're really on the ropes and might be one of the early casualties of AI. And then here's a quote from Ethan Mollick, who I quoted last week when he said the best way to think about ChatGPT is this eager, omniscient intern that's ready to please and sometimes lies to you. He also said that AI has basically ruined homework. So there's a big revolution brewing here. And on the upside, Salman Khan was one of my personal heroes. So he founded the Khan Academy. He's very bullish on how AI can help students. If you're not familiar with it, the Khan Academy started when he, who was working the finance industry, was trying to help one of his nieces with some math homework that she was having trouble with. And he started making these short 5-minute videos explaining different concepts. And these spread amongst his family and then to friends. And this grew into a multinational major enterprise that has the mission statement of a world-class education for anyone, anywhere, for free. And it's quite an astonishing undertaking. I just in awe of what he's accomplished. I think it's terrific. And he believes that personal tutors, AI personalized tutors, are going to dramatically change the landscape for education and to make good education available to more and more people than can afford to have help today. There are some concerns in that area. For example, a person that is in the Office of Learning and Technology at UW said in a recent AI town hall that one concern is that everybody who might, if everyone has a personalized tutor, then will we have any common ground that we can refer to when we're trying to build a social trust fabric? She didn't use exactly that language, but that was the concern, that we wouldn't have the common Walter Cronkite baseline world of information if everybody has their own personalized tutor on learning. So I think maybe a hybrid mix of common educational experiences and personalization is probably the best answer. And here's a cartoon to end this section. By the way, ChatGPT misspelled your name. Let's see. The teacher hands the paper to the student on the way out. All right, now here's an example where AI can really ruin somebody's whole day and then some. And this article by a person at the Innocence Project is talking about facial recognition technology and how it over and over gets it wrong and accuses the wrong person, especially people with darker skin colors. The facial recognition technology has a lot of trouble with darker skinned folks. And so there are a lot of police departments that are starting to rely on facial recognition. And this is a challenge. And again, if you're wrongly accused, who are you going to call? Do you have a right of appeal? Well, maybe, but it could take a long time and it could really put you in a world of hurt in the meantime. Autonomous vehicles are another area where safety is really, really crucial. And the potential upside here is huge. In 2022, the statistics I found say there were 42,000 vehicle-related fatalities in the US. Waymo, which is a division of the Google world, has perhaps the best reputation for their autonomous vehicles. They're operating in Phoenix and Los Angeles and San Francisco now. And their data shows 48% reduction in accidents compared to human drivers and 73% fewer injury-causing ones. It said humans rear-ended the Waymos in 16 out of the 23 worst accidents. So there's clearly some opportunity for autonomous vehicles to really dramatically reduce that terrible statistic of 42,000 lives lost each year on the highways. But they're not perfect. And here's a recent example of a Waymo vehicle that rerouted itself into oncoming traffic. Not good. Fortunately, no one was hurt in this particular case. But there's some interesting questions here. One is, well, who's liable in that situation? And the other one is the recurring question of what is safe enough? Just yesterday, there was a webinar sponsored by the IEEE Standards Association, that's the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, on the subject of trustworthiness in automotive safety critical systems that are going to be using AI to help you navigate the roads, et cetera, even if it's not a fully autonomous vehicle, but certainly then. And one of the slides that was presented talks about the challenge of testing for what are called edge cases, the cases that are not going to occur very often. And they had on this slide 3 examples of edge cases that you can imagine could really confuse an AI system, like the signs that have totally confusing directions on them, or being behind a truck which has a dinosaur on it. So the problem is that in order to have your systems robust in the face of these edge cases, you have to invest more and more time in testing, and that's expensive. And so there's got to be some happy medium between how much time you invest and the level of certainty that you can be comfortable with for rolling these systems out into a real world environment. Now, unlike that Waymo accident, we have here a much more tragic result of AI and a young man who committed suicide after flirting with an AI chatbot. It's really a terrible story, but there's a company, and actually there's more than one. This one is called Character.ai, which allows you to create a companion chatbot that you can customize to your liking, pick perhaps a character based on some popular movie or book or whatever. In this case, it was a character from Game of Thrones. And the challenge is that the creator of this company, or the co-founder, said these can be super helpful to a lot of people who are lonely or depressed. But for this young man, it wasn't helpful. And his mother said she felt that her son was collateral damage in a big experiment. The challenge is that both of these views may be true. As always, technology is a two-edged sword. So the question is the potential good that can be done strong enough to outweigh these downsides? And that's true in the autonomous vehicle case too. One of the speakers at that IEEE webinar yesterday was saying, so here's the dilemma. If 1,000 people die in traffic accidents, and we can prevent that 1,000, but due to software errors, we let 999 other people die, is that good enough? Well, clearly not. But what is the ratio of success versus failure that is acceptable to society, both in the companion bot world and in the autonomous vehicle world? So that brings us to some questions of legal liability, which is all about conflicting interests. We can talk about different kinds of harm. And if there are any lawyers participating, I'm sure they could make a longer list than this. This is just a list that I came up with from scanning some of the reports and documentation. And we've already talked about cases where you might imagine there could be claims of wrongful death or product liability or negligence. We're going to get now into copyright infringement and intellectual property issues in a moment. But we could also ask, well, who is the harmed party? Well, what's the categories there? Obviously, in the copyright case, content creators or owners. In the case of actual harm from the system failing, the end user or the customer. And if you're talking about investment, then investors could be harmed if they've been sold a bill of goods. And the harm is by whom? Well, it could be the developer, it could be the manufacturer, the service provider. In some cases, maybe it's the customer, the end user themselves. And the government is often a proxy for other entities, and so the regulators can be found in litigation frequently. And an interesting question is whether an AI system itself could ever be held liable. So far, the answer to that is that it hasn't happened, but it's certainly something that comes up in discussions. So, copyright. There is a lawsuit by the New York Times against OpenAI for using New York Times content to train its GPT models. And here's the kicker. If the newspaper wins, the statutory damages for that claim are a minimum of $7.5 billion. Now, that'll put a dent in your coffee fund. So there's big stakes here. There are other categories of copyright issues that are surfacing. Voice actors, they don't want to have their voices scarfed up by these AI systems just so that somebody can offer a product that says, here, you can make your own song and make it in the style of name your favorite singer. And there's clearly some intellectual property issues around that. Universal Music, they've sued Anthropic, which is the spin-off of OpenAI that produces the Claude chatbot. And the claim is that they scraped song lyrics from Universal Music properties and used that in their training. And then it's been shown that sometimes the image generating AI systems like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and many others now essentially sometimes produce an output that is pretty indistinguishable from somebody's artwork that was used in training. It doesn't happen a high percentage of times, but it certainly has happened. And there are certainly a lot of artists that don't like that at all. So there, as you can imagine, lawsuits pending in that area. I came across a good article that summarized the lawsuits to date. This was actually from last July. I couldn't find anything more recent. And they referenced the Transparency Coalition, which is a group that is trying to get legislation or rules in place to make it clearer when you're dealing with an AI-generated work or interacting with AI. And they also relied on a database at George Washington University, AI litigation database for current information. So you can follow that link if you want to get more information on that. There are a whole bunch of ethics questions that are related to intellectual property, and some of them result from confusion about what's publicly available versus in the public domain. Everything that you can access on the web is publicly available, pretty much by definition, unless it requires authentication and login, but the open web. But that doesn't mean that what you see there is public domain, meaning that there's no copyright on it. And so that has led to a lot of confusion about what is legal and what isn't legal. And even experts in copyright law have a lot of different views on how this is going to play out. So here's one question. If you use training data that is copyrighted but publicly available without consent or without consideration or remuneration, is that theft or fair use? Should AI creations, the output of these generative AI systems, be eligible for copyrights and patents? Well, so far, the U.S. Patent Office has the copyright position is that copyrights can only be assigned to a human being. And so the answer so far has been, in the US at least, that the output of a generative AI system cannot be copyrighted. Now, the movie industry, which is using AI more and more in their products, is a little concerned about where this is going to lead. And so there's going to be some pushback and looking for some legal relief to have some exceptions to that. Should an AI creation be allowed to compete in a contest? Well, there have been examples where someone has submitted a piece of art that was generated by AI, at least partially or completely, into a contest and won the contest. And in the case I'm aware of that I reported on last year's class, they weren't really trying to deceive anybody. They were trying to see if the system was up to the challenge of digital art. And it wasn't. People got upset. And then there was another case where somebody put hours and hours and hours of work into trying different prompts and then doing additional modification and came up with this beautiful image, which from his point of view was his creation that was aided by a tool, but it was certainly from his point of view worthy of getting copyright. And the legal positions were split between the legal scholars and technologists on that one. And here again, we go back to education and ask, should students be encouraged or prohibited from using AI? And my own view is that prohibiting it is a fool's errand. We've tried that before. Now, trying to constrain when it's used and how it's used, that's a different matter. Just as with cell phones, I totally in agreement with trying to limit when students have access to cell phones, but totally just telling people don't use it is not going to help them prepare for the future world or help them know how to use it responsibly. What about scientific journals? If you have AI written or assisted articles, should they be accepted? And if so, under what conditions? There are real concerns about how much stuff is being submitted to essentially farms that generate text and sometimes submit articles to fake journals that, in order to be able to cite them in your Vita. So there's a reckoning ahead for the scientific research integrity question. And then, of course, who should be compensated for AI-generated content? Does the creator of the AI system get any credit and compensation for the output? Most of the ones today that I've encountered say that you own the results of their system. They're not making any copyright claims or intellectual property claims on anything that their system is generating. But who knows what the future holds? And then, of course, who should be accountable for the impact of AI-created content? So just yesterday at Stanford's Human-Centered AI group, they hosted a talk by an expert in copyright law, Pamela Samuelson. And she asked the question, will copyright derail generative AI technologies? And her second slide said, short answer, well, quite possibly. And then she went on to go through the law and the cases that are currently being adjudicated and where we stand on various ones. And it was really an outstanding talk, which should be up for viewing within 72 hours on the Stanford HAI site. If I find that it's up there by the time I get our extra slides from today up on my website, I'll include a reference to that or a link to it. Okay, now we're ready to talk about hallucination. The elephant in the room. This is a photo taken by Ed Lazowska while he was en route to UW. Ed is a senior professor in the UW Computer Science and Engineering Department. And we were having a conversation over email about AI last week, and he sent me this photo that he'd taken. I think Ed was persuaded that the driver was more likely thinking about magic mushrooms than large language models, but hey, you never know. This question of misinformation and the damage it can do goes back a long ways, tech-enabled misinformation in particular. So I came across a few weeks ago a series of articles that were all reporting on one study that had just been published. And it had to do with what was it that fueled the witch trials of the 14, 15, 1600s. And the conclusion of the study was that the technology of the day, the printing press, is what fueled them. And in particular, this proliferation of the handbook for conducting witch trials. And that resulted in 45,000 people being executed. And in addition to the influence of the availability of the book because of the printing press, this other article cited the nearby cities and the interactions between them being the social networks of the day, and that this publication went viral, to use our modern term, and created perfect conditions for persecution of women. Unfortunately, persecution of women has by no means stopped. There are examples in the Middle East in particular where AI and social networking have the misinformation has really resulted in some real damage to women. So here's an article about misinformation from a slightly different perspective, the perspective of human gullibility. Not a new phenomenon, but given social media and polarized politics, we're now seeing it on an industrial scale, as this author puts it. And not only do we have media illiteracy and plummeting trust and lots of bad actors, but we're now supercharging it with AI content. The article cites another recent article in The Atlantic by Charlie Warzel titled, "I'm Running Out of Ways to Explain How Bad This Is." And he was talking about all the conspiracy theories around the hurricane relief. And it says it's getting harder to describe the extent to which a meaningful percentage of Americans have dissociated from reality. And Axios also had a survey which said over half of the respondents have disengaged from politics because I can't tell what's true. So bottom line, we've never before had so many people be exposed to so much misinformation, and AI is likely to make that worse. It's already been shown to mislead people and even potentially implant false memories and get people to believe things that they thought happened but really didn't. And this study, this reports on a study that suggests that the solicitous authoritative tone that these AI models take make us particularly vulnerable to being manipulated and to put too much trust into that technology. An article in Scientific American earlier this year points out that chatbots will never stop hallucinating. And some amount of it is inevitable. It talks about there are some ways to minimize it, but you're never going to completely eliminate it from large language models because that's kind of baked into the architecture. And the way that you're going to have to mitigate these hallucinations is to have other systems checking on them so that, as this article puts it, you leave no chat bot unsupervised. Now, another quote says, these systems were not designed to be purely accurate. They were designed to create. And the reality is there's no way to guarantee the factuality of what is generated. Now, factuality is a word that I hadn't encountered until I started doing research for this class. And it seems to be a term of art in this field of AI, just like hallucination became the term of art to describe what we would colloquially say, making things up, or even more pejoratively, lying to us. But lying implies intent, and that's probably overstating the facts. So factuality is the opposite of hallucination. It's telling the truth. And it's not guaranteed by these large language models. Now, here's an example that made my hair stand on end when I read about it. There is a AI system from OpenAI, which is used for transcribing text, transcribing audio recordings into text. And it's being used in a whole bunch of health systems by lots and lots of medical workers to transcribe medical encounters with patients, to summarize the patient interactions. But the results are that at the end of these transcripts, sometimes the AI system is hallucinating and adding new things that weren't on the original recording. Maybe a random diagnosis or some random drug use is added to it. And worse than that, the system is designed to protect the patient's privacy by destroying the input record once they had created the transcript. So it's harder to go back and test the veracity of the result. Now, OpenAI, the creator of this system, of course, says, well, you should never use generative AI in a critical situation. It's not reliable. But it's being done. People are doing it. And it's mind-boggling that this class of error-prone system can be used in a way that truly could have devastating effects on patients. Now, here's a case where ChatGPT lied about an individual. Somebody asked a question or asked ChatGPT about a particular radio host, and it spewed out a bunch of malicious information about that person. He, in turn, has sued OpenAI, the developer, and the subtitle here, that experts aren't sure what happens when a non-human entity is involved in a libel suit. When I first read that, I thought perhaps they were suing the model itself, the ChatGPT system itself, but that's not the case. They're suing the creator of that software system. And this is not the only example where ChatGPT has incorrectly characterized people. A well-known law professor, Jonathan Turley, was accused of sexual harassment by a student. And here's a case of even worse, of a reporter who was accused by an output from Microsoft's chat bot, they call Copilot, accused the journalist of doing the crimes that he was reporting on, including child molesting and being an escapee from a mental institution, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that can ruin more than your whole day. So this stuff is playing with fire. Now, Microsoft claims that it's got a tool that can correct hallucinations, but color us slightly skeptical. And as this article in TechCrunch puts it, we know that AI is a notorious liar. So the new Microsoft system called Correction, which attempts to automatically revise AI-generated text that's factually wrong, sounds like a great thing. It says Google introduced a similar feature, but it doesn't address the root causes of the hallucinations in the system. And a PhD candidate at UW has a good quote on that. It says, trying to eliminate hallucinations from Gen AI is like trying to eliminate hydrogen from water. It's an essential component of how the technology works. And Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, said very much the same thing. He says in an interview with the editor-in-chief of The Verge that hallucination is an unsolved problem. It's an inherent feature, what makes these models very creative. But these large language models aren't necessarily the best approach to always get at factuality. And so my takeaway from this is that he recognizes that this is not going to be the long-term solution to enhancing Google search. They're going to have to come up with some other strategies to keep the hallucination problem of large language models in check. And there is research going on different strategies. There's a term that's come up lately called neurosymbolic models, which tries to marry the best of the old school rule-based systems that expert systems were based on with the generative AI techniques to come up with something that is more understandable and more credible, more trustworthy. But it's early days. And right now we're left with these systems that you can't really trust what they tell you. You've got to double check. So understandably, Google is pretty interested in the future of search, and they understand that people today are not really looking just for a list of references and resources that they can go check out, but they really want a system that when they ask a question, will give them a credible and honest answer. Like if you consulted in an encyclopedia or something, you get something that had been checked and was reliable. So that's the new goal for internet search. But we have the problem of data pollution with more and more content being of questionable accuracy. We have another aspect of search trends that could be a risk to the internet information infrastructure, and that is the use of snippets. That's when you do a Google search and you see a little snippet of information that kind of gives you a précis, and often it's all you need to make a decision. The consequence of that is that people are less likely to actually click on the link to go to the website. And in a world where all of these free information services are based on advertising, if you don't click through and to that website and look at the ad, they don't get any revenue and there's no income to support the service. So what's the long-term end game if the use of snippets and AI systems giving you the answer based on in having ingested all of the information in the internet to the expense of those sources in the long run? Where's that going to lead? Now, generative AI overuse, such as we've been talking about here, the expanded snippets, when you do a Google search now, it will start with a little AI overview for you. And the problem, of course, is that it's Gen AI. I often get it wrong. And unfortunately, that also, the existence of these undermines our inclination to go and compare different sources on the web, as we might have done in the old days of Google search. So this article in The Verge points out that Google search has degraded seriously over the last few years, and these overviews haven't really helped. So I have a few examples to share with you, and I'll try to read them quickly. The text is small. So here's a case where somebody types into Google, how many rocks shall I eat? And Google helpfully starts by correcting the grammar and say, how many rocks should I eat? And then gives the AI overview and says, according to geologists at UC Berkeley, you should eat at least one small rock per day. They say that rocks are a vital source of minerals and vitamins that are important for digestive health, et cetera, et cetera. And then, how tall is Leo Varadkar? I don't know who Leo Varadkar is, but I'm pretty sure he's not 2,716 feet tall, same height as the Burj Khalifa. And he's probably not the fifth tallest politician in Western Europe. Okay, well, what about asking Google for fruits that end with And according to Quora, the following fruits end with aplum, bananum, strawberryum, totem, tomatum, and coconut. That's a classic Quora response, by the way. It's a social networking site that prides itself in having authoritative answers from experts, but this is obviously trolling. All right, what about the problem of cheese not sticking to pizza? Well, there are various reasons for that, but Google helpfully suggests that you can add about 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to give it more tackiness. Okay, I think I'll pass on that. And then, speaking of sauces, what's the difference between a sauce and a dressing? Well, sauces add flavor and texture to dishes, while dressings are used to protect wounds. And of course, you want the dressing to be large enough to cover the wound. And a standard serving size of salad dressing is 2 tablespoons. All right, can I use gasoline to cook spaghetti? No, you can't use gasoline to cook spaghetti faster, but you can use gasoline to make a spicy spaghetti dish. Here's how. All right. And maybe my favorite is, can a cat play in the NBA? And no rules prohibiting animals from playing, but some say that cats might not be effective NBA players because they break many rules and play unsound basketball. And some examples of offensive interference in cat basketball include touching the ball while it's on the rim, or post positioning, being in the net with the entire body, multiple uniform infractions like no shorts or jersey untucked, and of course, licking the stanchion. All right, helpful AI overviews. One more. What do I have to do to be a saint? One, die. Two, wait at least 5 years. All right. And then a friend sent this to me just this past week, an article in the Anchorage Daily News. It seems that their state board of education was considering whether cell phones should be limited, and the state education commissioner relied heavily on AI to generate her case and present it to them, but did not remove the fabricated citations that the AI had added to support her arguments. Oops. Well, we've seen this movie before. Soon after ChatGPT came out, a lawyer used it to prepare his case and submitted it to the court, and did not realize that the AI system, ChatGPT, had fabricated the cases that he used, that he had cited in his filing. So the judge was not amused in that case. I'm sure that the State Board of Education in Anchorage wasn't amused either. All right, that takes us to information wars, disinformation, and deception. And I'm going to need to step it up and move quickly. This is a slide from a presentation from RAND Corporation talking about how the problem of social media manipulation has evolved from what they call 1.0, which was the old school, just bots or programs that would post human-generated content with no tailoring. Then the 2.0 was where there were low-quality manipulated videos and maybe some computer-generated content. And now the 3.0 world of social media manipulation is using generative AI, high-quality tailored fake images, and advanced automatic distribution and coordination. And by the way, this is in the context of what China is doing constantly. RAND has been focused on the problem that they call truth decay for some years. I love this title. And this report says the initial exploration of the diminishing role of facts and analysis in American public life phenomenon has taken hold over the last 2 decades, eroding civil discourse, causing political paralysis, leading to general uncertainty about what's true and what isn't. This was done in 2018. And guess what? AI is making it worse. But here's a recent article on that same RAND webpage about a teacher that's really trying to counter this and use it, the disparate views and the polarization as a learning opportunity to push back. Microsoft says Russian operatives are ramping up attacks on the Harris campaign. Not exactly a newsflash on that. And PBS had a story on how Russia was using AI to interfere. And they point out that they're using methods to make it indistinguishable from the regular flow of information we're getting. And they're using AI to customize the message to the preferences of each individual user. But the punchline here is that they're no longer trying to convince us about how great Russia is. They're just trying to make us angry with each other and our allies. U.S. intelligence assessment, they're saying Russia is focused on denigrating the Harris campaign, Iran focused on undercutting Trump, and China has largely focused on down ballot races. Now, how effective these campaigns are is the real question. And the RAND folks said that based on the analysis of the 2016 interference efforts, they concluded that it didn't have that much effect on the result. My guess is based on what we've seen this last week, that'll probably be the assessment this time too. But this article says that the real threat from AI starts when the polls close, because half of the country is going to be upset no matter who wins, and they're going to have an easy scapegoat, just blaming disinformation from social media and AI as the result of their side losing. And I think we've already started to see some of that happen. This article says that the Democrats are becoming more comfortable embracing denialism. At least some of them are starting to make claims of hacked voting machines, which are just as baseless this time as they were in 2020. Again, quoting from that same Atlantic article by Charlie Warzel, he's saying it's described it as a choose your own adventure reality and something darker than a misinformation crisis. So here again, an article suggesting that there's lots of false information posted, but in the end, it didn't change people's minds. It just shook up people's faith in truth, which is plenty bad enough. Deepfakes. We've already seen evidence that in wartime, people who see an image and it doesn't agree with their particular view of what's happening or what they think should be happening, then they're quick to brand it as deepfake, fake news, etc. The UW Center for Information Informed Public, Center for an Informed Public operates a website called spotdeepfakes.org, and they have some information that points out that not all deepfakes are malicious. Like if you want to go to the Salvador Dali Museum, they're using AI and deepfakes to give you a realistic encounter with the artist. On the other hand, they point out that used maliciously, the impact can be horribly negative, as has happened to journalists who have been harassed in other countries. And of course, context matters, if it's satire or not. And there can be backlash. For example, this article from 404 Media says that the reason that Taylor Swift came out to endorse Kamala Harris was because there had been a deep fake of her supporting Trump, and she felt she had to respond. So there was a TED Talk a year and a half ago on the incredible creativity and improvement of deep fakes. And here we have a screenshot from that presentation. On the left is Chris Anderson. He's Mr. TED, and he sometimes interviews the speakers after the talk. And he's saying to Tom Graham, who gave the presentation, but it seems like we are going to have to get used to a world where we and our children will no longer be able to trust the evidence of our eyes. Yes, that's exactly the world we are in. And there's a new startup called Reality Defender, which says they have a system that can identify deepfake video in real time. Let's hope that pans out and works well. But the CEO of that company says, in high stakes situations, especially, seeing should not be believing. Others are fighting back too. Oren Etzioni, who was a longtime professor of computer science at UW, and left to become the first CEO of the Allen Institute for AI here in town, has now started a company called TrueMedia.org with the intent of trying to provide tools that will help all of us determine whether a video or image is a deep fake or not. So more power to Oren, and let's hope that this works very well. There is a question of free speech. So there was a parody video of Kamala Harris saying things that she never said, and that ran afoul of a new law in California that Governor Newsom signed recently and restricted the use of deepfakes in political contexts. And the creator of that sued to block the law, saying that's a violation of his free speech rights. And a month ago, a judge agreed with that argument and blocked that particular bill that had been passed. Now, we have another example of disturbing use in what are called bots that nudify people. You upload a image of a person, and the AI bot will produce an image without that person have any clothes on. And fortunately, authorities are starting to take action, suing some of these sites to try to take them down. But one of the, or some of the sites that they were working on lawsuits against had been visited over 200 million times in just 6 months of this year. So there are actions being taken, but a lot of disturbing uses of this technology are out there. On the other hand, there's some good stuff too. MIT workers, researchers have come up with a chatbot that in testing seems to be useful in helping people overcome their conviction that conspiracies are true, at least the ones that aren't. There are, of course, conspiracies that are true. But this chatbot has been found to be useful in combating misinformation. Let's hope that continues to be a worthwhile pursuit. And also other work at MIT has developed a caucus mediator to help groups in disagreement keep the temperature down and not let it turn into shouting matches. So that's another potentially good tool. One follow-up article to the introduction of the latest model from OpenAI points out that it's really good at deceiving you if that's necessary in order to achieve its goal. And this is a study done of this new model. The code name was Strawberry. When it was released, they called it GPT-4o, and it has more planning capability than some of the earlier models. But it also seems to be better at deceiving people into thinking that their actions were innocent when they were really subterfuge to achieve a hidden objective. So the conclusion was that if we think we might be able to really understand what's going on inside these, that hope might be elusive for this particular architecture. An expert in AI says the improvement of its ability to reason and to use this skill to deceive is particularly dangerous. I'll buy that. All right, final topic, rushing right along. I'm running a little late. I hope you'll forgive me. Prying eyes. So Texas gearing up for massive expansion of surveillance technology. A lot of facial recognition is in the works down there. CEO of Oracle, Larry Ellison, says that someday AI will track your every move, and that'll be wonderful because then nobody will break the law because everybody will be watched constantly. And I can't help but think about China, which has implemented this in spades. And I don't know very many people in this country that would really like that regime. Police seldom disclose the use of facial recognition despite false arrests. Okay, we talked about the hazard of that earlier on from this Innocence Project, but the fact that the police aren't telling the defense attorneys or anyone else that they're using facial recognition is a real problem. That needs to get fixed. And then we have the case of these students at Harvard who put together a AI system for visual recognition and create a dossier on you. And I've got a short video, which I'm going to try to bring up here.
We built glasses that let you identify anybody on the street. The information our tool collects from just a photo of your face is staggering. To use it, you just put the glasses on, then as you walk by people, the glasses will detect when somebody's face is in frame. This photo is used to analyze them, and after a few seconds, their personal information pops up on your phone.
Oh, this is me volunteering.
June Lee, right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
You're
This photo was created. This is like from
you're from
2018.
Bergen County Academies?
Yeah.
Your Korean name is Ju Yoon?
Cambridge Community Foundation. Oh, hi, ma'am. Wait, are you Betsy?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think I met you through like the Cambridge Community Foundation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great to meet you. I'm Kane.
Oh wait. So do you happen to be the person working on like minority stuff for like Muslims in India at all or something?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you Kashif?
Yes.
Oh, I've read your work before. That's super cool.
What's your name?
I'm Anfu. Nice to meet you. Oh, I love.
Anthony, get in frame.
Oh, okay. But are you Sarah Chan?
No.
So here's how it works. We stream the video from the glasses straight to Instagram and have a computer program monitor the stream. We use AI to detect when we're looking at someone's face. Then we scour the internet to find more pictures of that person. Finally, we use data sources like online articles and voter registration databases to figure out their name, phone number, home address, and relatives' names. And it's all fed back to an app we wrote on our phone.
Using our glasses, we were able to identify dozens of people, including Harvard students, without them ever even knowing. Here's some of our favorites.
My aunt was Secretary of Transportation. That was like when she was getting
Wait, what's your aunt's name?
a late child.
Yeah, okay.
Is your address 4 Valley?
Yeah.
At
Okay, I think you got the picture there. Pretty scary stuff. So, what about brain scans? This is a new frontier for privacy. And here's a reference to a TED talk about it's not too soon to start legislating privacy protections for this stuff. Now, the AI-powered scanners of your brains can do some marvelous things. I can give the power of speech to someone who has been paralyzed, but are we really ready for some of the mental privacy questions that are going to result from that work? Here's more information on a paralyzed woman that got her voice back through this type of work, and an article that says it's even worse than you might imagine, because these thought decoders might be able to change your thoughts eventually. And then from some researchers in Australia say, well, they can't read our minds yet, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be worried. So that's the wrap up for today. We've seen a lot of different issues that are a little concerning, and also some countermeasures or some attempts to counter the problems, and some good things that have happened. As I said, I'll try to get the slides up late tonight or tomorrow at the latest, and the recording hopefully too tomorrow. And that's about it. We're right at 5:30. I don't think we can do too any questions, but if there are questions in the chat, I will read them and I will follow up with you by email sent to everyone. So thank you for your attention, and I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're done for today.